From the moment you open the door to taking in that first breath of the distinctive R8 smell and observing the quality of the materials all around you. The Rover R8 was arguably the best Rover they made. Not the most rovery, but everything was screwed together properly, everything worked, and it was the ultimate combination between British and Japanese engineering. Some will say that the Rover 600 was actually a bit better, but that was really just the Honda. The R8 was released in '89, though there may be a couple of press release cars still knocking about on an F plate. The one thing that always staggered me about the R8 was the way they kept hold of the rear lamps. They did do a smoked version of the lamps on later models like this one, but the hatchback came out in 1989. The saloon came out in 1990 with the same rear lamps. Then came the three-door hatch, which was basically the same back end but with fewer doors. And then the coupe, also based on the 200 and with the same lamps. And then the cabriolet, based on the 200 with the same lamps. And finally, the Tourer came along a little bit later on with the same rear lamps. I have owned these R8s on and off for the past 25 years. No, even more than that, I think. From the moment I first drove one, I was kind of smitten by it because I was comparing it. I was comparing it to its rival, the Ford Escort or the Vauxhall Astra, and the Rover build quality was just so much greater. It was in a different league. It made everyday cars something to aspire to. And although these days we're used to being able to have a cheap car that you can drive around that doesn't rattle or squeak and has decent materials, back in the 90s you simply didn't. In 1990, if you wanted a properly built car, you'd buy an Audi, or you'd buy a BMW or a Mercedes. And then suddenly the Japanese realised that they could make decent cars as well. And so Mazda, Toyota and Honda were all building cars on a par with the quality of the German stuff. And I would say Rover were lucky to have teamed up with Honda because they made cars that managed to marry build quality and drivability and style as well. There are many people who will look at an old Rover and go, oh, what do you want one of those for? Piece of junk, and do the head gasket joke and all that thing. And those are the people that have never actually driven one, or at least driven one that hadn't been looked after. And let's face it, any car can end up in the wrong hands. There are still a few of these old R8s about, but very few in this trim level. The majority are 214s with the 1.4 K series engine, which is a good engine, and the fact that there were that many around would suggest that actually they are good. But also, that's the one that sold the most. Then there were the 1.6 Honda engines in either twin or single cam variants. But we're going a bit too far off the point because this is a T series, which is, to my mind, the pick of the bunch anyway. Although it's a heavy engine, it has bags of torque and it really does pull itself along these roads without really much effort at all. 2-litre twin cam, what else do you really need? Underneath the bonnet is the 2-litre T-Series engine, which develops 136 brake horsepower, which is enough to make this car quite nippy. And if you're wondering why I'm doing this part of the video in the yard rather than up on the hills like I was before, well, it's because you can't stop anywhere and open up the bonnet on a Rover without somebody going past and saying, oh, is your head gasket gone, mate? Honestly, wrong car, wrong engine. I think some of these people have dropped out of comedy school. The Tourer is basically the holy grail of 400. To actually have one is just quite amazing, really. It wouldn't be difficult for me to talk quite a lot about exactly why I like this car. So I'll try and keep it brief. The interior is just something else. The half leather seats with really soft, good quality leather. And the pattern on the seats and the way that these actually are recessed into the seats. The shape of the seats, the door cards, the pattern on the door cards, the wooden bit. Yeah, wooden bit. That is proper wood veneer. And it's the same on the front and on the dashboard as well. I never actually understood though why they didn't finish it off here and have another tiny bit of that wooden strip just there as well. But going back to the door card, it's the attention to detail I really like. The fact that we've got a vent that goes through there and up through there, not just the wood cappings or the quality of the materials, and the door bin that's got some carpet on it as well. I need to fix that. The centre console is the only bit that really lets it down with a bit of hard plastic, because the rest of it is all really lovely, nice tactile material, and the nice rubber mat and the nice, really easy to read instrument cluster. That's it, easy to read. One of the first things that struck me about these cars was actually the size of the speedo and the rev counter. Maybe they were considering their demographic had bad eyesight. I don't know, but I like it. I also like the visibility out of the front. You're sat quite high up, relatively speaking, and you can see the corner of the car. That's something they forgot to do on more modern cars, where suddenly you end up with blind spots everywhere, great patches around the car that you suddenly can't see, and then you need cameras. Also, the Rover was one of the first cars with this lovely soft feel headlining, and of course the downside to that is, you know, most of them are quite saggy now. But then the sunroof as well, this lovely sunroof visor, a little bit of extra protection from the sun so you can have a sunroof, but you don't have to get blinded by the sun. Excellent idea. And one of the most comfortable seats ever. Oh look, there's 50 pence. I'll grab that. Oh, I've lost it. Over here we have a glove box, which is damped. That's a nice touch. And then the coin tray, which currently has 42 pence in. When I say these seats are comfortable, I mean they don't look that comfortable because they're quite firm. But my first ever experience with sciatica, I happened to have a 220 GTI at the time, and they didn't have the same pattern as these seats, but they were the same kind of quality, and that was the only place I could find myself comfortable, was sat in the car. Not only are the seats nice and comfortable, but they have design to them as well. They're not just slabs of sponge stuck on springs. The real thing to talk about with this car, though, of course, is that it's a tourer, not a hatch, not a saloon. And that's why it looks like that with the boot open. And it is, as you can see, a commodious boot. It's wide, it's long, and it's deep as well. It's fitted with a proper carpet there and all around the sides as well. And it just looks, well, rather excellent quality indeed. And then this proper load cover is just excellent. Then to top it all, we have lights in the boot lid. Easily one of my favourite ever cars. And when I say one of my favourite ever cars, I don't mean one of the favourite cars that I happen to have owned, but one of my favourite ever cars. Although the frontal design was conceived in the 80s, it simply doesn't look that dated. I mean, it does look old, it does look retro, it does look from the 90s, but there is just something timeless about it as well. For anybody who's curious, the bonnet bulge there, it looks like it might be some sort of joke, but in actual fact, without that bulge there, you wouldn't be able to close the bonnet because the cam cover sticks up a bit too high. It is, to me, a car from every angle, one that just looks right. And I'm a fan of the facelift model with the bigger indicators as well, but the gentle curves, the swage line that doesn't really have an actual angle on it. and then the rubbing strips. The body detail's really good, and so are the wheels. The later cars, of course, had the corporate grille on the front, which made them look a little bit like an 800. Actually, I like that. What I don't like, though, was when people would stick one of these grills on an earlier model that had the small indicators. Then it looks wrong. And the only problem for me with having a car like this has become its rarity, because this piece of glass there is rare. This piece of glass there is rare. The tailgate is rare. That can make me feel ever so slightly anxious about any of it getting damaged. Here's a question that you may ask me if you was you asking me this particular question. Is there anything about this particular Rover R8 that I don't like? Well, interesting question. Glad you asked. Bit of talk steer there. And the answer is no. I absolutely love it. I love the way it drives. I love the way it goes. It's only 136 brake horsepower, but it does have quite a bit of torque. So it pushes it up these hills kind of effortlessly. Many a car I'll be coming up here in, and I'd have to be changing down to third just to keep going. But this one, no. Fifth gear, all the way. There's not much more I could ask for with this car. It's got enough punch, it's got enough power, it's big enough, it looks just right, it drives superbly. The steering and the gearbox is so direct, the steering just does its job. It's not too stiff on the suspension, but it's not baggy. You can fling it around corners and it will go around them. It is an engaging drive. It's a driver's car that you didn't realise was a driver's car. Honestly, the car could do with a respray, really. It's got so many mismatched colours on it, and scratches and repairs, that it only really looks good in the dark. But that makes it just a bit more usable in some ways. And that's not really what a car review is about. I'm talking about the actual car, not the condition of the car as it is now. And it is 29 years old almost, so it can be forgiven for a few of those bits. So, the Rover 420 GSI Tourer, a conclusion. Quite possibly my favourite ever car, except for just one. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being a channel member, and thank you for subscribing, and thank you for all of the other thank yous I need to thank people for. Just lots and lots of thank yous all around.